Middle of the country, but not middle of the road opinions. It's the podcast dedicated to sports in the air capital of the world.
I'm going to Wichita.
Wichita, Kansas, and beyond. With Tommy Castor and Weston Mills, this is Keeper of the Games.
Hey, what's up? Welcome to Keeper of the Games. We are the wildly underqualified, yet mildly entertaining podcast all about sports and sports topics in the air capital of Wichita, Kansas, and beyond. I'm Tommy Castor, back for another episode along with my co-host, Weston Mills. And Weston, we got to start the show off with this before we even talk about anything else. On a scale from 1 to a billion, how excited are you that Chiefs football is back in less than 24 hours from now?
Tommy, the answer is a billion, but I was talking with my wife last night, and this is the weirdest thing I've ever experienced as a sports fan. My Chiefs fandom is above and beyond any of the other teams that I root for. That's been the team that, as a little kid, that I have just followed the most. And as a sports fan, it has all been about, can the Chiefs win a Super Bowl? Like, building up to that moment. And we did that. And yeah. I truly, I don't know if it's probably a combination of everything. You know, it's with COVID, the short off season or short off season, plus we've got other sports going on. This feels so weird. I don't know what to do as a Chiefs fan and how I'm supposed to feel. You know, obviously you want to repeat, but it's just, like I said, I'm having a hard time even comprehending and articulating how I feel as a Chiefs fan coming off a Super Bowl. I guess it's a great position to be in.
It's kind of like climbing Mount Everest, right? You've climbed that mountain and then you're like, all right, I climbed it. What do I do now? You know, like we don't really know what to do with our hands. Although that's why the whole theme of the offseason for the Chiefs has been run it back, right? I mean, it's all about, let's do it again. Let's, see how many of these bad boys that we can get. I do have to point out, if you're watching this episode on YouTube, if you are visually watching it, maybe on our Facebook page or our website, you'll notice, I think you can kind of see from my camera, you'll notice both Weston and I are rocking the Chiefs Super Bowl attire, the swag from the Chiefs. Mine's backwards. Yours is not, for whatever reason, on my camera. But we're both rocking our Super Bowl champion shirts, which feels really, really good to say that. And that's not something, Weston, that you and I planned ahead of time. We just got that mind meld going on between co-hosts, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. And up here in Kansas City, it's Red Friday, which, for those of you in Wichita that haven't got to experience a Red Friday in Kansas City, every Friday before Chiefs game, it's Red Friday. You're supposed to wear red. The town, the flags go up. The town kind of goes crazy for that. But obviously, as the first game is on a Thursday, they're hosting Red Friday on Wednesday. And the first one of the year, the first Red Friday, that is, of the year, is always kind of a much bigger event than the other days. And the Chiefs hand out whatever commemorative flag it is. This year it's a Super Bowl champions flag. And then all the money that they make, I think it's $5 a flag, goes to the Ronald McDonald House. So they did that today. People go crazy. I actually was out of the house, I think, at 6:13 in the morning to get to McDonald's because they go so fast. Last year was the first year, and for those listening, you probably can still get online and order flags from the Chiefs team store. They do take I think a couple weeks if you go that route, but the ones at McDonald's go up so fast. So got out up and early today to get a couple of flags for me and a few others.
The other thing that I think is really exciting about the fact that football is back is that it really didn't feel like football season outside until the last 48 hours or so. And the weather has gotten cold. And, at least, I don't know about Kansas City, but at least down here, it's raining quite a bit. I mean, it feels like fall. It feels like football weather for sure. And so we can sort of take off our summer hat, put on our fall hat, which means football season is officially here. We've got a lot to talk about with the Kansas City Chiefs. We alluded to it on last week's show that this episode was going to be chock full of basically a Chiefs preview as we look forward to not only just their week one matchup against the Houston Texans, but also just the season as a whole for Kansas City on a more comprehensive level than we have on other episodes. So that's what we're going to do in just a little while. We're also going to talk about previews for both KU and K-State football. They're back in action this weekend as well, kicking off their seasons, both non-conference opponents. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Recap some of the high school prep football in the Wichita Metro and a lot lot more. It's all coming up on this episode of Keeper of the Games. I want to remind you to hit subscribe, so whenever we have a brand new episode of the podcast, you'll get a notification. That's the best way to know when we have new episodes. You can listen to us and subscribe anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, and many others. You can find us all right there. Like I mentioned a couple moments ago, you can watch full episodes on our website, cogpod.weebly.com. You can also watch full episodes on YouTube and on Facebook just by searching for Keeper of the Games. And of course, you can follow us anytime on Twitter and Instagram at CogPod, at KOG Pod. With that, Weston, you ready to dive in and talk some Chiefs football today?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So it was just 8 months ago, Weston, that the Chiefs completed a pretty incredible comeback. It was one of three big comebacks in the playoffs that propelled Kansas City to their Super Bowl championship. And just 8 months ago is when they faced off against the Texans. They were down 24-0 early on in the divisional round. It didn't look good. I remember being out with some friends of mine. We were enjoying some wings and some beer and watching the game. And literally my friend and I looked at each other when they were down 24-0. And he looked at me and he said, "Are you ready to go? Like, should we just go ahead and pack up and go home?" And my response at the time was, I don't think so quite yet. I mean, I'm not optimistic, but if the Texans get up by one more score, then yeah, we can go ahead and pack it in. Obviously, that didn't happen. The Chiefs came back from behind and won that game 51-31 in the divisional round against the Houston Texans. That's who the Chiefs are facing off against on Thursday night at Arrowhead Stadium. Number one, I'm super pumped that football is back in that regard. But number two, I'm even more excited about the fact that the Chiefs get to go and play the Texans again after they got down big early, but then they were able to win big to move on. That's just a huge thing for them in the AFC Championship game. And then obviously we know what happened from there. So first things first, your overall opinions on what the Chiefs had to look forward to against the Texans on Thursday night.
Okay, so I'm actually going to back up and do my own first things first, because I want to give you a quick flashback to Houston last year, because I was actually at that game, and I will say I think that was probably the second most emotional roller coaster game I've ever been at. I was at Arrowhead. I had probably spent the most money I'd ever spent on Chiefs tickets. It was fantastic seats. I just decided I was going to do it. And obviously incredible game. Talk about the lowest of lows followed by the highest of highs. The emotions and the atmosphere in Arrowhead was absolutely rocking. I think the only atmosphere that was maybe better was the 2014 Royals wildcard game. I was actually at Kauffman for that one as well. That 13-inning thriller that Salvi hit the walk-off on. So pretty incredible game. But, I think really going into the game on Thursday, one of the most important things I think that we're going to look at is, first of all, what does this secondary look like? And particularly being the key for the Chiefs here is going to be slowing down Deshaun Watson. With that being said, Houston has had some turnover. They lost DeAndre Hopkins because Bill O'Brien makes some incredible decisions that no one quite knows why. But they still do have Will Fuller, who is a fantastic wide receiver, but can never stay healthy. But coming into week one, that's not an issue. So it's slowing down Will Fuller. And then from there, how does the secondary contain everybody else? Because I would certainly anticipate Charvarius Ward. The Chiefs don't do a lot of shadowing with their corners, so it's not going to be just Ward covering up Will Fuller. But you'll see Charvarius Ward on him a lot, and then help over the top of Will Fuller quite a bit, and then the rest of the secondary kind of containing what's left. The Texans brought in Brandon Cooks. He's questionable. It looks like he did actually practice a little bit more today, but still not quite sure if he's going to go. He kind of has some injury histories himself, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Texans are a little bit more cautious with him. And then from there, they've got Kenny Stills, and they recently brought in Randall Cobb. So those are kind of the two guys you're going to look at to see what they can do. If the secondary does kind of either shadow or put help over the top of Will Fuller constantly. And then the new addition in Houston that we didn't see last year in the playoff game is David Johnson from Arizona, which was part of the DeAndre Hopkins trade. Most everyone knows that David Johnson, a fantastic running back in Arizona, just for whatever reason, whether he didn't fit in last year in Arizona or injuries or whatever, he just didn't have it last year. But if he returns to his, 2018 form, then, I think that'll be a major issue for the Chiefs to shut down.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the skill players for the Texans. Obviously, we all know how great of a quarterback Deshaun Watson is. He's probably, I'd put him top 5, maybe top 3 in the NFL as far as the quarterback position is concerned right now. I mean, obviously he just got a huge contract. The Texans were able to reward him, for his good play, and they see him as kind of the benchmark franchise quarterback for this Texans squad for a long time. The other skill players, though, on offense for the Texans, looks like it'd be a really, really solid, really dynamic and dangerous offense in the year 2016. You've got David Johnson, you've got Duke Johnson, you've got, Brandon Cooks, Kenny Stills, Randall Cobb. Other than Will Fuller, it's a little bit of an older offense for this Texans team. I'm not downplaying at all that David Johnson has skills. Like you said, he saw a little bit of a decline the last couple of years in Arizona. I'm sure he's got a lot of motivation to try to turn things around this season. But then Randall Cobb is kind of a shell of his former self that, we saw in Green Bay a few years ago. Brandon Cooks was a great wide receiver for the Rams for a number of years. I think he's got some motivation. So you've kind of got these guys coming in that probably are looking to resurrect their careers a little bit. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying that it's not an offense, aside from Deshaun Watson, it's not an offense that I overwhelmingly am thinking, wow, the Chiefs are going to have a lot on their hands. And I might be proven wrong, but at the same time, it's not as dynamic or dangerous as I think. When you look at their names, you're like, oh man, like I know these names, but I would say that almost all of these guys have lost a step from, a couple of years ago to now. So it'll be interesting to see. I know you kind of started off by talking about the secondary for Kansas City on how, it holds up. I'm even more interested in seeing what, Chris Jones and Frank Clark can do against the offensive line for the Texans if they can get a lot of pressure, on Deshaun Watson. Obviously, he's a mobile quarterback. He's going to move. He's going to run. But what can guys like Clark and Jones do against that offensive line for Houston? That's kind of the matchup I'm looking at least on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think another thing we want to look at too is really how the run defense holds up. I mean, everybody knows that was our weakness last year. It will be, I think it'll be kind of hard to gauge what we think about it after this week 1, because, if David Johnson goes off, I think there's a real possibility that David Johnson is the David Johnson of old.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it could be, well, he only went off this week because the Chiefs' run defense is still a little susceptible. But also the big thing, and I think a lot of people don't always process this, is I think game script. And by what I mean by that, meaning the play calling that is in effect come second, third, fourth quarter really dictates how we look at this run defense. Because if the Chiefs go up and they go up 2 touchdowns or even are just scoring, getting points on the board with every possession, well, that's going to put the pressure on the Texans offense to keep up and therefore not necessarily run the ball. So often, our offense can kind of help with that run defense because the game script for the Texans will then basically take David Johnson out of being effective because they just can't afford to be running the ball at a slow pace.
Well, and I also will say when, I go back to the offensive line, for the Texans, outside of Laramie Tunsil, there's really not a whole lot there on the offensive line for the Texans. A couple of names that I noticed as I'm looking through the depth chart, Zach Fulton is there for the Texans. He's a former Chief, Nick Martin at center, but really Laramie Tunsil is the only guy that I think is a high caliber, O-line player for this Texans squad. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of pressure. And I think that plays into the run defense as well a little bit. I think that you're going to have an opportunity to see the Chiefs stop their run at a little bit of a higher rate with this game than, maybe we would have saw last year, because I would say that the Texans offensive line outside of Tunsil is relatively suspect. One other thing about Houston, and I'm kind of switching gears a little bit and going to the defense, really the Texans defense lives and dies by JJ Watt. It has forever, right? It has for the last several years or so. JJ Watt's probably the best defender in the NFL, or maybe top three. What do you think as far as the weapons? We know all about the weapons that Kansas City has versus a player like J.J. Watt, who's going to be captaining that defense for Houston tomorrow night.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it's kind of the same thing that I was talking about for the defense, or how the Texans move the ball. Kind of the same for us. It'll be very game script dependent, right? Because the thing about having a one dominant defensive lineman is you can run plays away from him to make him essentially ineffective, right? I mean, you're going to chip the running back on JJ Watt. You're going to put, a double team him, essentially pass block or run block. And then you're often going to move plays just opposite of the way he's lined up. If you're going to have Pat rolling, you're going to roll him probably away from JJ. You're going to do a lot of different things game script wise to kind of, combat what he can bring to the table. You kind of feel like the Texans have lost a little bit of a step since they lost Jadeveon Clowney. So they spent pretty much all last year without him. So it's really needing to kind of pair something just a little bit more for the Texans to really help JJ Watt out there. I think the Chiefs are going to absolutely take the top off, and I think you're going to see big firework type offense right off the bat. And part of that too, I think there's so much continuity from last year's offense that the Chiefs are already in a great position to not in a weird year without a normal offseason to bring guys in. Now, with that being said, the one guy that I think we're all kind of, what to watch for tomorrow night is Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who didn't get the OTAs coming in. With that being said, I think you will see maybe more of a share of the carries or just duties, because receptions obviously out of the backfield is a big part of the Chiefs offense with Darrell Williams. And I think as the season goes on, it'll shift more towards Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but especially early. The Chiefs love Williams. They've always loved him. He battled injuries last year. He's been effective every time they've used him. So I think a lot of people are very, very focused on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, as they should be. He's talented and he's going to produce, but I think there's going to be a bigger split with that offense. So I don't know. I kind of went all the way around. I think to answer your question, I think with the Chiefs continuity, I think there's going to be able to kind of attack that Texans defense pretty well. And I do expect some big points, and then kind of shifting from there, what to watch for. I think obviously everybody wants to see a splashy start out of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but I do think Darrell Williams is going to have a big day as well tomorrow.
Weston, I'll tell you, like when I watch football, I watch it as a casual fan. I follow it. I obviously know what's going on, but I don't know much about schemes. I don't know much about, game plans. I know you played, a lot about that, and, all these different, the ins and outs of the intricate parts of football. It's going to be really flashy. People are always going to watch wide receivers and cornerbacks, right? They're going to see speedy guys like Tyreek Hill and McCole Hardman, even Sammy Watkins to an extent against the secondary of the Texans. For me, though, and I just find this really exciting to watch for tomorrow, I'm going to be keeping an eye, if we're talking matchups, with Travis Kelce and Clyde Edwards-Helaire with the linebackers, because that's just Travis Kelce has been such an efficient piece of that Chiefs offense, and he's that veteran presence there. Patrick Mahomes has such a great rapport with Travis Kelce. He's going to probably go to Kelce early and often. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Texans recognize that pretty early on. They're going to probably try to start doubling Travis. And then I think you're going to start seeing opportunities for Clyde Edwards-Helaire to catch the ball out of the backfield, when, maybe the guys like Tyreek and McCole are covered or double teamed or whatever. And Travis might be the same way. I think that's going to, open up opportunities for CEH out of the backfield to catch the football. And I do agree with you. I think that early on, there's probably going to be a decent split between him and Darrell Williams. Williams. But I think that's what I'm most excited about with Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not necessarily him running the ball. I think that's great, but I'm looking forward to watching him catch the football out of the backfield. The Chiefs have not had that since Kareem Hunt. And so I think it's going to be really exciting to watch that matchup between guys like Travis Kelce and Clyde Edwards-Helaire against the linebackers for the Texans.
Yeah, and to your point, I actually think you're not going to see as much Travis Kelce being double teamed, and it's exactly actually why you kind of what you were talking about. I think because the Chiefs are moving into a position of having such a dynamic pass catching back, and then the important thing being having Tyreek Hill on the football field, that really prevents Travis Kelce from being doubled very often, because you have to have help over the top with Tyreek Hill. I mean, sometimes I think as much as recognition as Tyreek Hill gets, I almost think he doesn't get enough credit from maybe the average fan for understanding what he does for an offense without even catching the football. And the difference between him and I know a lot of times you talk about that wide receiver that can take the top off is the fact that he can catch the football so well and run such good routes that he's not that guy that teams will say, you know what, we don't want to get beat over the top, but they're not going to connect on many of those. So there'll be important times where we roll someone over the top, but we'll take the chance that they catch, complete 10% of those deep balls or 20% or whatever. Tyreek Hill will make you pay and make you pay often. And that just opens up so much for that offense. And particularly, like you said, now you've added or at least, people are expecting him to be a dynamic pass catching back out of the backfield. I think what that does is really ties up those linebackers and essentially is going to give Travis Kelce so many one-on-one opportunities. And I think teams are going to have to play one-on-one with Travis Kelce, because they're going to say what we'll live with is 5, 10, 12, 15-yard receptions from Travis Kelce, as opposed to getting beat over the top by Tyreek Hill. Or, you even think of like a 3 to 5 yard pass to that running back, but often they're in isolation on a side of a field where that ball is caught and they're turned upfield and gone. So it is almost that same home run field or home run type pass play when you do a lot of isolating running backs with linebackers. So I think teams are going to say, it's not a great game plan, but let's let Travis Kelce catch the ball and just try to hang on and make that offense stay on the field as long as possible. And have to grind out a series as opposed to just giving up home runs and giving up home runs. I think that's going to be the strategy. And because of that, I think you'll see a huge, huge day out of Travis Kelce tomorrow night.
It's an abundance of riches for sure for Kansas City. That's not a secret. Everybody knows that, that the Chiefs have so many weapons. We've gone this entire time without talking about the best weapon of them all, and that's Patrick Mahomes under center for Kansas City. We talked all about, all these different matchups and the wide receivers and the running backs and, even the defense for Kansas City. But you've got a guy like Patrick Mahomes under center. This is, I think, to put it in perspective, I was thinking about this yesterday. If you were creating a football team that had to take the field after or in the middle of a pandemic, when everything has completely been turned upside down, there's just nothing is certain. You just don't exactly know what's all going to be going on, and you're trying to build a football team. You want to have, like you mentioned, that continuity. You want to have that experience. You want to have, players on the team that have been there. They know what's going on. They know the system. They know the culture. You want to have a head coach that has a long tenure, that has a great rapport with his players. You need that, especially when you've got guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, some of these other rookies that are coming in that haven't had the opportunity to get the reps like some of the other guys. So that's really what you're looking for. The Chiefs are perfectly set up, not just in normal times, but they're perfectly set up for how weird and crazy of a season this is probably going to be. Oh, and by the way, they also have the best player in the NFL at quarterback. So when you're building that team, you want all those different things, and then having a franchise quarterback that's, the face of the, not only the face of the franchise, but a face of the NFL, is just the cherry on top. And so I think everybody is interested to see what is Patrick Mahomes going to do now? He's wowed us for a couple seasons now. He was an MVP. He's got the Super Bowl ring. He's got the huge contract now. What is he going to do next? What do you think he does next?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a record-breaking season. I mean, why would there be any reason to think that he's not continuing to build what he's done in the past? And really, last year was statistically a step back just because he missed games. But there's not any reason to expect not just monster numbers from him this year. And the thing too, I think you're seeing a recognition of that, and really the position Pat has put the Chiefs in. I mean, even if you look at Vegas, the Chiefs are a 9-point favorite, which, over a playoff team from last year, that's just huge, especially in a year where
not to interrupt you. I saw they're favored in 15 out of 16 games. Obviously those can change as the season goes on, but I think it was ESPN favored in 15 out of the 16 games is unheard of. Yeah.
And that is absolutely because of Patrick Mahomes. There's no doubt about it. Really, if you look at even the over under, I guess this is a quick side note. The over under for the total for tomorrow night is 54. 54. Smash that over. There is, I'm telling you guys, lock of the century. There is no chance that this game is under 54 coming off a short off season when you got the number one offense in football who's returning everybody pretty much, followed by defenses are not going to be, they're just not going to be in shape come week 1 or week 2, I don't think, because OTAs, the restriction on minicamp, those kind of things, as much as you trust professional athletes to be in shape, and I'm sure that they are to some degree, it's not the same as what the team puts you through. So you're going to have tired defenses. It's going to be points. Smash that over for tomorrow night if anybody's willing to put some money down.
I think I saw offensively for Kansas City, and I might have this wrong, but from what I saw, there were only 2 players that are not returning to Kansas City that played 50% or more of the snaps last season on offense. And that's obviously Laurent Duvernay-Tardif and Cam Irving, are the only 2 guys. They've got everybody else back that played significant time offensively last season for the Chiefs. Having that continuity, I think that's the big thing is, they've got the familiarity with one another, where when you look at the Texans, David Johnson is brand new and they've got to try to figure out how are they going to utilize him versus, Duke Johnson, who's been there, for a little while. What does an offense for Houston look like without DeAndre Hopkins? So they've got some question marks offensively where the Chiefs do not. I would say, maybe you have a different opinion than I do, I would say really the only, I don't even want to say blemish, the only question mark about the Chiefs entering this season is what does their secondary look like? What's it going to be long term? When you've got, some holes in there, the Chiefs have had to replace Kendall Fuller, try to find ways to do that. Obviously, Rashad Breeland is out for a couple of games. Where do you mark that as far as a concern level? Is that an actual concern or is that just I think they'll be okay, but it might not be as strong as last year?
I mean, I think it's a concern. I mean, it's relative, right? I mean, the Chiefs having a concern is a lot better than, say, the Dolphins or the Giants or the Jets having a concern. But I mean, it's their number one concern, but with that being said, obviously Rashad Breeland will be back eventually. You've got some young guys who you hope are going to take steps. So it's a concern even more in the beginning of the year. But the thing about the secondary is, you can do things to help scheme those guys and put them in good positions. And Steve Spagnuolo did a fantastic job, I thought, last year. Obviously, the defense still was the worry compared to what the offense was doing. But overall, Steve Spagnuolo did a good job, and I think he'll do a lot of things. And you do have some good flexibility when you have guys like Tyrann Mathieu, like Dan Sorensen, that have been there, and you feel comfortable maybe moving them around. And again, I'll use the word, scheming them to help out guys like L'Jarius Sneed. We're going to see Rashad Fenton, early on. Obviously,
Hamilton will probably play, get some reps back there.
That's right, and both Rashad Fenton and Antonio Hamilton have been in the system.
Yeah,
so it's not like while they haven't started or seen a lot of minutes, they've been around. They know what's going on. They're comfortable with the other guys, and I think that's a huge advantage. But I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that I think the secondary is going to be the number one concern, or maybe the better word is question mark, really going into the first few weeks of the season.
I would say the only other, I don't even want to say question mark, but the only other thing to keep our eyes on, and it doesn't get talked about much at all, we haven't discussed it at all on this program, is that Dustin Colquitt is gone, and he was Mr. Chief, for Kansas City. There's no concern in the kicking game at all. Harrison Butker is one of the premier kickers in the NFL. But now the Chiefs turn over punting duties to undrafted Tommy Townsend coming in to punt for the Chiefs. I think you get kind of spoiled when you have Dustin Colquitt, and obviously in those lean years for Kansas City when he was out on the field punting all the time, there were many times I said, he's the best player the Chiefs have. He's at least trying to give them good field position. Do you think that's a concern at all, that the Chiefs don't have the guy that has been punting forever for Kansas City there anymore, and now they're going with a undrafted free agent?
I mean, no, just in the sense that you certainly don't expect the Chiefs to be punting much. Not that it's, obviously it's important when you need it to be able to flip the field position. And certainly just, we don't know what we're going to get yet out of Townsend. But overall, it's not, I don't think it's a huge concern just because the way this offense clicks and fires, you don't expect to be punting a lot or being deep and punting, right? I mean, this offense is usually moving the ball to some degree where you expect to hopefully be, punting from shorter distances if and when you are punting. I think another thing that we haven't talked about, and I think this kind of speaks volumes to the anchors of this position, but the offensive line. And I think a lot of people think that might be the biggest concern. Obviously, when your job is to protect that $500 million man, that's going to be an important position. But I think just the stability and the high level of play we've seen out of Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz, I think just kind of, at least for me, calms my nerves and makes me look at that unit not as much a concern as something like the secondary or the run defense, even though, you're really having a carousel in that interior offensive line that didn't really play that well last year. Just because you're just feeling like you've just anchored that unit with the two vets that have been so good. I don't feel like I'm as concerned about the offensive line, even though a lot of people I think maybe have it as their number one question mark.
Well, I'm not going to lie about it. It wasn't that long ago that I was done with Eric Fisher. I was ready to get him out of town. I think I even tweeted about it during a couple different games not that long ago when I was like, hey, is the Eric Fisher experiment over yet? Can we move on? Can we do something different? And I think that's probably where some of that comes from people who are, having concerns about the offensive line, not realizing that, Eric Fisher played relatively steady throughout the Super Bowl run for Kansas City. And then Mitchell Schwartz was, I think you used the word anchor, definitely call him the anchor of that offensive line for sure. So while it's not the strongest unit for this team, if I'm ranking my concerns, I'm putting secondary, above offensive line for sure. We're going to talk a little bit about some of our full season predictions and projections in just a moment. Before we talk about the full season, let's wrap up our talk about week 1 with the Texans. So Weston, I know you already gave your opinion on the over-under. I'd love to get a final score prediction from you for week 1 against the Texans.
56-38. I think, I'm serious. I think it's going to be big points. I already love this Chiefs offense, but I just really think with everything that's gone on this offseason, I think offenses as a whole are going to put up points. And I really think there's going to be big points tomorrow. I mean, that's how confident I am in that over that I'm going to give you a 56-38 countdown for tomorrow.
Wow. That's a lot of points for sure. It's not, I mean, it's not unheard of considering that these two teams, the final score last time was 51-31. I mean, that's not that far off from what the first matchup was back in the playoffs. I'm going to go a little bit lower than that for my prediction. I'm going to say Chiefs 45, Texans 24 is my prediction. So I think the Chiefs win by 3 touchdowns. I think there's still going to be a lot of points put up on the board, but I'm not going to go that far and say, what'd you say, 56-38? Is that what you said?
56-38.
We'll have to revisit these from a week-to-week basis and see how we actually do. But I think we're both given the win for Kansas City, and we're both going with the over. So no argument there between the two of us. Let's quickly talk about the full season predictions. Before we talk about specific predictions, one question that I have just overall about this Kansas City team, and I'll give you my opinion after I get yours, is there such thing as having too high of expectations for this team? And I'll tell you why my question is what it is. It's because, you mentioned at the very beginning of the program, for so long, the Chiefs were constantly working towards that Super Bowl. They were trying to make it to the summit, and they never really could. And every year, I, as a fan, would have these expectations. And in some years, they would be bigger than others. But I had these expectations about what the Chiefs were going to do. And then inevitably, they would never do it. The regular season would fall apart, or they get crushed in the playoffs by, crazy losses or whatever. And I always felt bad about having such high expectations. Is it okay for Chiefs fans to have incredibly crazy high expectations, even if they don't actually come true, considering that we are coming off a Super Bowl win?
Yeah, of course. Really, I think expectations are almost you anticipate that they're going to grow year to year, and it's almost like kind of what I talked about in the beginning of the show. Like, where does it go from winning the Super Bowl? And really, it's one thing to win, and you've got some seasoned veteran that's leading your team, and it's kind of the end of his career. Well, okay, you gotta maybe temper expectations with something like that, but this isn't the case. It's a young team with potentially the best player in all of the NFL, coming off a Super Bowl win. I think the expectations absolutely should be that, and potentially, if you're looking at just from a win total perspective, I think it's not unreasonable also to think that they're going to improve on their win total from last year. I think that is reasonable, and I'm sure what the Chiefs are expecting amongst themselves as well.
So it's crazy to even think this, and to even ask this question kind of sounds like blasphemy a little bit. From here on out, as long as you've got a guy like Patrick Mahomes quarterbacking the offense, is it Super Bowl or bust every year? And I say that obviously that's their goal. That's what they all want to do. But from a fan's perspective, let's say the Chiefs make it to the AFC Championship game. Is that a disappointment? Or they make it to the Super Bowl and they lose. Is that a disappointing season? I can't believe that that's even the question that we're talking about for this franchise, but I think it's fair. Do you think that it's got to be a Super Bowl win from now on, or the season is just a complete disappointment?
Man, I don't know. It just kind of feels like I just don't like the or bust thing but that is going to be the expectation every single year while they have Patrick Mahomes. But so I guess, it just depends on how you want to define bust. Like sometimes, you feel like, oh boy, they just absolutely flopped. Can't believe this team didn't win the Super Bowl. Well, that even in the best of circumstances, the Chiefs win. You look at a Brady model, they win. What is it? He won 6, right?
Yeah.
That's really a best case scenario, or maybe you're shooting for a little bit more than that, but that's about the best expectation. And that was over 18 seasons in New England, or again, I don't have that in front of me, but I think that's about the number. So really, you don't say, oh, Brady was a bust because he didn't meet expectations, on 50% of his seasons. But I do think that you're right when you say that really is probably the new expectation in Kansas City. And I think it would take something like having a few seasons of missing the playoffs, or maybe just barely making the playoffs and not doing anything before you kind of reevaluate what your expectations are. But really any team that has been consistently competitive, I would say it's Super Bowl or bust, because, unless you're a franchise that's been starving like the Chiefs were, that's the only goal. That's the only thing you're shooting for is the Super Bowl. with the exception, like I kind of just mentioned, you go on a big drought like the Browns, boy, just making the playoffs. That would be great for them. But if you've been competitive, then I would say it's Super Bowl or bust per se.
The other thing too to keep in mind is that this is a completely different scenario. I know you mentioned the atmosphere at Arrowhead was not unlike the Royals wildcard victory, and to kind of use that as a comparison, the Royals made it to 2 World Series back-to-back. They won one of them. I think most people knew that was a fleeting moment, right? It's not a dynasty that's going to last for 10 or 15 years. And pretty soon, sure enough, the Royals were back in rebuilding mode, and that continues to this day. This is different in Kansas City for the Chiefs. There has been a commitment to continuity, a commitment towards building a culture, a commitment to having your franchise quarterback locked up for a long time and really having those expectations with that. So it's a kind of a different model for sure than what we saw a few years ago with the Royals. A couple of predictions that I want to get from you before we move on and move away from Kansas City. And you can say yours and then I'll say mine. I want to know who's your pick for offensive MVP for the Chiefs for the season, defensive MVP for the season. Let's even say rookie of the year for the Chiefs. And then I want to get your final win-loss total, your prediction for the regular season for Kansas City.
Okay, so offensive MVP, can we just go ahead and do you want to just take Patrick Mahomes off the board? Because I feel like that's the obvious answer.
Right.
Is going to be Patrick Mahomes. I actually think it's going to be Travis Kelce. I think he's going to have an absolute monster year this year. And really, I almost don't want to hash out everything I said before, but basically that is why I think with the addition of Clyde Edwards-Helaire and then Tyreek continuing to play, I think it's going to open up so much for Travis Kelce this year. And I think teams are just going to say, we're going to accept that to whatever degree or just try to defend him. And I think it's going to create a monster year and really end up being that team MVP. Well, actually, here, I'll go ahead and flip it to you then before I move on to the next one. Who's your offensive MVP?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with the pick that a lot of people have been talking about ever since he was drafted, and that's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think he's going to have a breakout year. I'm not quite ready to say he's going to have a breakout year like Christian McCaffrey had a breakout year, because that was crazy. His rookie season and the way he broke onto the scene was just nuts. So I'm not going to put him quite at that level, but I do think that one area, and nothing at all against Damian Williams, nothing against Darrell Williams, nothing against, when they had LaShawn McCoy or Darwin Thompson, nothing against the running back core that the Chiefs had post Kareem Hunt, but they were looking for someone that at that caliber that fit a certain kind of mold that Andy Reid likes in the offense and that Eric Bieniemy likes. And I think they got that with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think that while there might be a timeshare early on, I think he's very quickly going to establish himself as the premier running back for this Kansas City team in a huge, huge change of pace, as opposed to, Pat and the wide receivers and Travis Kelce, blowing the top off of everything, every play. I think you're going to be able to see the Chiefs really be able to be a little bit more balanced. And I really do think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be a guy that's going to have a huge breakout season for Kansas City.
Yeah, and I love that take, and I think you're right, but I think people are going to have to really pay attention to what he's doing, because I think the numbers might not be there, just because I do think, like we've talked about, I think Darrell Williams, is going to get to play. Obviously, the football is going to get spread around just because there's so many options on this offense. So I think you could be absolutely right, but folks are really going to have to kind of look more than just the numbers, because I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire's numbers might not be just, popping off the page, but he will be doing so much for the offense, just like you said. So I guess moving over to the other side of the ball, we talked about defensive MVP. There's not a whole lot that needs to be said about this, I guess, but I think it's going to be Frank Clark. I think, and I was one that was fairly outspoken last year about his really ineffectiveness early in the season. He was on and off of hurt, I guess learning a new system, didn't really get things turned on until the playoffs, but boy, did he show up at the end of the season and in the playoffs. He just turned it on. And I really think with really him being comfortable in the defense, plus the addition, and I guess not addition, but the fact that they've kept Chris Jones, I think those two are going to put up mega numbers. And I think teams are still going to focus on Chris Jones, kind of freeing up Frank Clark to really take advantage of some one-on-ones. And I think he's going to be just incredibly disruptive this year. And especially with as good as I think the Chiefs' offense is going to be, meaning opposing teams' offenses are going to have to throw the ball, just opening up even more opportunity for Frank Clark to get to the pass rusher and put up big sack numbers this year.
I like that take. I think Frank Clark is going to have a big year as well, but he's not my pick for defensive MVP. Basically, the bottom line, Weston, is that the landlord called and your rent is due, and he's coming to collect your rent. I'm going to Tyrann Mathieu as defensive MVP for Kansas City. That not only has the community embraced him, and not only has he embraced Kansas City, but on top of that, he is undoubtedly and unquestionably the leader of the secondary. And it's a core, it's a unit that we have discussed at length about our concerns. I think he realizes the fact that he's going to have to pretty much captain that secondary. And even though he's not a cornerback, I think that he realizes that the best way for the Chiefs to limit the amount of points that the other team puts on the board is for him to play out of his mind and for him to influence the other players in the secondary. So I'm going with Tyrann Mathieu. Love the guy. I think he's really come on. I was skeptical about him, kind of like how you were with Frank Clark. I was skeptical about him coming in. He didn't have the best reputation in the world, kind of like Frank Clark, but he has really won me over with his personality, the kind of guy he is, the kind of player that he is. I'm definitely going with Tyrann Mathieu for defensive MVP.
And I think I think the thing that both of our players share, really is their effect on the secondary that everyone thinks is a question mark, right? If Frank Clark is disrupting the team's offense, by getting to the quarterback, hitting him, getting him out of rhythm, actually getting sacks, that's going to obviously help the secondary. Or not even hitting the quarterback, just being there, making that quarterback throw the ball quicker, just a lot less time for the secondary to have to cover wide receivers. And then on the flip side, as your pick, obviously we don't need to say him just covering or whatever zone or man he is covering. He does a fantastic job in being there, but the presence he brings to some of this young secondary, or maybe I should say inexperienced secondary, is going to be invaluable. So I love that pick as well. And it's a perfect segue too, because as we talk about rookie of the year for the Chiefs, the obvious pick being Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I actually think that if you're just talking about, I guess it depends on what you say, right? Is it rookie of the year or most valuable rookie? I'm going to kind of shift and say most valuable rookie, because I think the Chiefs have shown they can be effective with a lot of different running backs. Not to say that we've already talked ad nauseum about how much I love Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but I think the Chiefs' most valuable rookie is going to be L'Jarius Sneed. I think he's going to be a fantastic addition to that secondary. I do think you're going to maybe see a slow start. I mean, cornerback is already a tough position. Plus, he played a little bit of safety at Louisiana Tech and is actually kind of shifting back to corner. He played corner, played safety, shifting back to corner. It's already a transition to learn that in the NFL, but I think he's going to be a fantastic addition. And especially, I think even as you see Bashaud Breeland come back, I think L'Jarius Sneed will either stick at one of the cornerback positions, or you might see him slide over and play, be that kind of that every down nickel corner that's going to be on the field. 85% of the time they're going to be in the nickel. So even if he's not, starting at one of the outside corner positions, you're going to see him a ton. And I think he's going to be a huge addition to this defense.
I think you're right in the fact that out of necessity, L'Jarius Sneed is going to be pushed into duty. But I'm not necessarily sure that I would call him most valuable. And, I know it's kind of wrong of me to pick a rookie to be my offensive MVP, but not my rookie of the year. Obviously we all know the impact that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to have, but I'm going to go somebody different. And that's Willie Gay Jr. Willie Gay Jr., I'm going to make a bold statement here, and you might disagree with this. We haven't even seen Willie Gay Jr. play a game yet. He might be the best linebacker the Chiefs have on the roster right now, and he hasn't played a game. If he's not the best, he's definitely up there. And this is a stat that I think is really interesting. So in 2019, I didn't know this. The Chiefs allowed the third most receptions and second most yardage to running backs in the passing game. That's huge, defensively for Kansas City. That's definitely been a weak spot for the Chiefs. This guy, Willie Gay Jr., is a linebacker that runs a faster 40-yard dash than a lot of cornerbacks that are in the league right now. He's quick. I think we've talked a lot about the secondary. We've talked a lot about coverage issues that the Chiefs might have. I think the fact that they can plug in a guy like Willie Gay Jr. right away, I think is definitely going to help shore up that defense. So I'm really excited to watch him. I think L'Jarius Sneed is going to be a great impact player too, but I'm giving the nod to Willie Gay Jr.
Yeah, I do like that pick though as well. I mean, the thing that he will provide to the Chiefs is with that athleticism that he has, you can stick him out there. You don't have to worry about him being isolated on a running back. He's big enough and fast enough to guard whatever combination tight end you have, whether you have an overly big tight end, he's got the size. If you got a fast, athletic tight end, he can stick with them there. And the fact that you have a linebacker that can kind of move around the field like that and, you feel comfortable in isolation just allows you to be, give so much more help to your outside corners or your safety or your slot, whatever. It gives you a lot of confidence and ability to scheme around that when you have a linebacker of his caliber. So, I hope he picks up the coverages quick. I think that's really the only concern. How fast does he pick up the defense? From a football standpoint, I think the guy's going to be outstanding. It's just kind of a matter of when it clicks for him.
It's pretty awesome to know that not only do the Chiefs have this really strong continuity core, but then they've added, several rookies that can come in and make an immediate impact. So really excited to watch them as the season goes on. Last but not least, before we move on, we've talked Chiefs football this entire show so far. Let's talk about your prediction for win totals for the Chiefs. And then let's even, let's talk about how far we think they're going to go. So what say you on that?
Yeah, so I would think 14-2. I think is where we're looking at with the Chiefs. I like you mentioned, they're favored on 15 to 16 of the games. I think there'll be a couple slip ups. I mean, they have the Bills, the Patriots just aren't what they were. I just can't. You wouldn't predict the Chiefs losing any AFC West games just based on really where their opponents are at in kind of the rebuild process. But at the same time, my God, they have just been running the AFC West. Law of averages says they're going to lose a game eventually, right? I mean, so you maybe expect a loss within the division, and they've got the Saints, they've got the Bills, a couple of tough teams. I think maybe one of those, but I really think 14-2 is what you're looking at here.
As far as how far they go, are you calling another Super Bowl win for Kansas City?
I don't know how you couldn't predict another Super Bowl. I mean, I think it's not even the Chiefs fan in me. I think they're either the favorite for most of the talking heads or, a very popular choice for most of the talking heads. I think another Super Bowl is what I'm expecting out of this team, or certainly at least another return.
I'm going to say 13-3 is my prediction for the final record for Kansas City. Just taking a look at their schedule, you've got really tough matchups on the road against Baltimore. They're on the road against Buffalo. They're on the road against Tampa Bay, which who knows, what Tampa Bay is going to look like, but they're on the road there. They're also on the road against New Orleans. Those are four, tough games, 2 against AFC opponents, 2 against NFC opponents. And then you got to think that there might be a chance where they maybe drop an AFC West road game potentially. I don't think that's going to happen, but you never know. So that, I would say that's 5 maybe toss-up games. And I think it's realistic to say the Chiefs maybe drop 3 of those really tough games. So I'm going to say 13-3, but I think 14-2 could very well happen in the realm of possibility. And then I agree with you. How can you not predict the defending champs who have just completely reloaded, and not only that, but they've added weapons as well to not repeat. I mean, football is a funny game and it's a weird season, but at the same time, I like their chances for sure.
The only thing I'll add to that is, I think the Chiefs, I don't know, luck is not the right word here, but in a season in which they did have a fairly tough road schedule, I think being a road game almost has a non-existing factor to me. I mean, I really just don't see what advantage other than the team having to travel. There's a lot of, you talk to the big gambling guys, you're an East Coast team traveling west and mixing the time zones. Kansas City's, Central Standard, that doesn't have a huge effect.
Yeah.
You're just not getting, other than the travel, a huge benefit to being the home team. With that being said, I don't know I don't think we've talked about this, but the NFL is allowing teams to do 70 decibels of noise that has to be started at the beginning of the game and can't be turned down or manipulated in any way till the end of the game. And then obviously, I think most NFL teams or stadiums are allowing some fans in. So how loud can 16,000 Chiefs fans be? I just don't even think. Let's just say the Chiefs fans, being as rowdy as they are, can be 10 decibels louder than the next loudest group. I don't think whatever that number is going to be enough to add to the pumped in crowd noise to have much effect. I think offenses, and really it's constant. So both your offense and the other team's offense is going to hear that same noise minus the little bit that the 16,000 can do. I don't think there's going to be much of a home field advantage this year.
Yeah, I think it neuters, the home team for sure a little bit. So that'll be interesting to see. Now, next week on the program, we'll definitely break down week 1, the matchup against the Texans. But I would also recommend that if you're listening to this and you like the Chiefs and you want to follow them, you should follow both Weston and I on Twitter, because I don't know about you, but I tend to always live tweet games and try to make it as funny as I can. So you can follow Weston at WMills94, and you can follow me at Tweets from Tommy. And of course, I'll have a full breakdown of week 1 on next week's program. All right, let's transition very quickly. I know that we're probably gonna go past our time limit today, but there was just a lot to talk about with the Chiefs. We're gonna transition into college football now. Both KU and K-State, they take the field for their first games this weekend as well. Not just the NFL, but also the Big 12 in action. We're not going to do a huge comprehensive breakdown of the Jayhawks or the Wildcats, just mainly because there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, it wasn't until just like a couple of weeks ago that we really even knew that these teams were going to be playing. And then, from that point on, there have been a couple of Big 12 teams that are not even playing this weekend, like Baylor and TCU, because of COVID tests. It does look like, as of right now, as of this recording, both the KU and K-State games will go on as scheduled for Saturday, although there were reports of a COVID outbreak at the University of Kansas, but it does look like that only 3 of those patients, or those people afflicted with COVID-19, are actually football players. So as of now, it doesn't look like the game will be impacted when they play Coastal Carolina on Saturday night. Your overall thoughts, we'll start with KU, overall thoughts on the Jayhawks in their first matchup against Coastal Carolina on Saturday.
Yeah, obviously a disappointing loss last year to Coastal Carolina, a team that they probably should have beat. They're favored by 7 going into this game, which, that feels pretty good for Kansas, with considering that they lost last year. I think the thing to watch, and I'll be curious, Les Miles has been pretty hush-hush about who's going to start at quarterback, whether it's going to be Thomas McVitie or junior Miles Kendrick. I think it'll probably be Thomas McVitie. I think Miles Kendrick may be the probably better choice, but it seems like probably one of those things that it's close enough that I think Les Miles is going to, give the nod to the senior and the guy that he brought in kind of as his guy, back from his LSU days where he was kind of recruiting McVitie, and McVitie's had a weird path to getting to Kansas, but I think McVitie ends up being the guy. And you certainly, for Kansas, I think this needs to be a building game for them. I would love to see them come out and not just win, but win, handedly. And that's not necessarily a blowout, but just take care of business and make this a game feel like KU's the Big 12 opponent and they're bringing in, a non-Power 5 and beating up on them. That's what it would be nice for Kansas to do. But I think it'll be a fun game to watch overall. If
you talk to, I would say probably 95% of Jayhawk football fans, they would tell you, and I'm right there with them, that one of the most important things that they would like to see with this football program moving forward would be for Les Miles and Brent Dearman to find a starting quarterback and stick with them. Be the quarterback for this season for the Jayhawks. Let that person get comfortable under center and lead the team. And so, whether that's McVitie or Kendrick, I think it's important. And I don't know if this will happen. I mean, it does look like there are reports that potentially Les Miles is cool with having another 2 quarterback system, but I don't think that that's super effective. I love the idea of just getting one of these guys comfortable in the system and just letting them captain the offense for KU. The other thing that I think is going to be different from last year to this year, I've gone on record saying that last year's game against Coastal Carolina was the worst football game I've ever watched in person in my life. But what's different is that the Jayhawks have a different offensive coordinator this time in Brent Dearman, who is the future of this program, in my opinion. He's gotten comfortable. It does look like Les Miles went on record saying that he was going to let Dearman call the plays. So hopefully, he's kind of an explosive guy. And so I like the opportunity for Kansas to put up a lot of points in this game, or at least a lot more than they did last season against this team, which was only 7. So I like that opportunity for them. I think that the Jayhawks have a bad taste in their mouth about what happened last year. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see Kansas get a big win this weekend. The one thing that is kind of, the unknown, the X factor, is that we don't know who Coastal Carolina's starting quarterback is going to be either. They have not revealed that, and they're not going to until game time. So a little bit of gamesmanship there from the Chanticleers of Coastal Carolina. But I do think KU ultimately ends up with the victory. And it might be one of the only victories that we talk about this season for KU. Also, Kansas State. So I guess before we move on to Kansas State, KU, as of right now, is scheduled to play on FS1, nationally televised game at 9 p.m. And I know you said you were going to stay up late and watch it on Saturday night. I think I probably will too. It's football, it's back, and I'll definitely watch that. But then a change in the schedule for the Wildcats. They were scheduled to play in the afternoon. Now they're going to be playing at 11 a.m. on Fox because of the COVID outbreak with Baylor. It was the Baylor-Louisiana Tech game that is now scrapped. So instead it'll be K-State and Arkansas State happening at 11 a.m. on Fox. That's going to be a big test for the Wildcats, not necessarily with the opponent, but just kicking off the season on national TV like that. Yeah,
absolutely. And maybe some of our listeners will think I'm a Jayhawk homer, which I am, but Tommy, we try to do our best at being unbiased when it comes to the K-State coverage or anything else. But I just don't think this game is going to be exciting. There's not a lot of storylines from K-State. I think they're going to win handily. They're 10.5-point favorite. Arkansas State, there's nothing there that excites me about this storyline. Obviously K-State's returning their starting quarterback in Skylar Thompson, who you're expected obviously big numbers out of. They've got a senior running back in Harry Trotter on the depth chart. I think one thing that, I saw the other day, it looks like maybe number 2 on the depth chart at running back is this Deuce Vaughn, who may remind some Wildcat fans of a young Darren Sproles. This guy is 5'5" out of Round Rock, Texas. So, I think it'll be maybe interesting to see maybe some of these younger guys. I think is probably what you're looking for maybe out of this Kansas State game as K-State hopefully runs away with this like they should. They've got some young quarterbacks. I think that there's this quarterback out of Pennsylvania, and I am drawing a blank on his name. Will Howard, who's a freshman quarterback from Pennsylvania, who has moved up to the number 2 spot on the depth chart. If Kansas State kind of gets ahead in the second half, you might be able to watch and kind of see what to expect out of the future there. But that's really the only storylines that are popping to my head out of this game, as K-State should hopefully win handily.
One advantage that Kansas State has a little bit is that they've got a week of film to watch on Arkansas State. Arkansas State is already 0-1. They played last weekend against Memphis. I actually watched part of that game over the weekend. It was just on ESPN, and there wasn't a whole lot of other football on. And Arkansas State actually showed a little bit of promise. They were ahead 14-7 in the first quarter before Memphis pulled away, ended up winning that game 37-24. So the Wildcats have some film to watch on this team. I'm sure that Coach Kleiman will have them prepared. But Arkansas State does have some talent. The one other storyline to keep our eyes on, I just mentioned a few minutes ago about how it looks like there are 3 players with KU that have COVID or tested positive for COVID. But there have been some issues with the Wildcats as far as COVID-19 outbreaks in the past and just injuries as well. Coach Kleiman said on Monday that the Wildcats are entering their game without anywhere close to the number of guys we started camp with. So there could be some guys at several positions for the Wildcats that they're missing. And it sounds like, according to some sources, that wide receiver and offensive line have actually been hit the hardest. So we'll have to keep our eyes on that. That is one storyline I would say to keep our eyes open for. But considering that the Wildcats are a 10.5-point favorite going into Saturday at home at Bill Snyder Family Stadium, and that they can have some fans there in the stadium, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that Kansas State wins that game. We'll have recaps on both KU and K-State on next week's episode, as well as, like we mentioned before, a recap on week 1 for the Chiefs. Let's very quickly, we're running out of time here, but let's very quickly get into our Wichita Whip Around here on Keeper of the Games and talk a little bit about week 1 in the Wichita high school prep basketball scene, or I'm sorry, football scene. Basketball is not quite yet, but definitely some big wins in week 1 for some teams around the Wichita area, like Garden Plain taking down Conway Springs 14-13, which was a big nail-biter game. Garden Plain able to get the victory there by 1 against Conway Springs. Goddard beat Bueller. That's a big win for the Lions. Mays beat Andover 20-6 to open up the 2020 season. Joshua Sanders had 3 scores there for Mays to win that game against Andover. And then, I think you got to look at the parochial schools in Wichita. Bishop Carroll wins a thriller in their opening game against Junction City. They got that win 29-28. And then Cape and Mount Carl, also with the win in their opening game as well. So any takeaways for you in the first week of prep football for the Wichita area?
I think my biggest takeaway is that, hey, they're playing football, and it seemed to be, it seems like things went smoothly week 1, and I think that's, maybe the boring answer, but my biggest takeaway from week 1.
Yeah, so Capon actually beat Dodge City 42-0 on the road, it looked like, against Dodge City. So definitely a big win there for Capon. And then it looks like we have not heard any updates to the contrary, but it looks like this weekend we'll actually see City League schools back in action around Wichita. In fact, some of the matchups pulling them up here around the Wichita area for this weekend. Capon is going to play Bishop Carroll. That's happening on Friday night. Did you have something else?
Yeah, Tommy, I don't know. Maybe I missed you saying this, but we missed Derby playing Mill Valley up here, lost 45-14. Mill Valley is, they're an absolute power up here. So, but I don't think Derby expected to get throttled like that. That was probably a disappointing opener for the Panthers.
Yeah, no, and that's a huge story, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because I didn't realize that at all. So, no, definitely, that's a big loss for the Panthers there. And I obviously you are in the Kansas City area. I was unfamiliar with how good of a team Mill Valley is.
Yeah, Mill Valley it's kind of, I may botch this, but kind of Lenexa, DeSoto, Shawnee, Mission. I'm not exactly sure the lines of that school district, but it's turned into a real high-end program, and they throttled Derby there.
Yeah, so I may have misspoke about the City League getting back in action. It does look like there are some games scheduled, and I'm looking at Catch at Kansas right now for the schedule. Wichita East and Wichita North, they're scheduled for the 14th, which I guess is this weekend coming up. Heights is playing West this weekend as well. So there are several of these games that are scheduled right now for the City League. No word about whether or not these games will actually take place. So East and North, Heights and West. Then you've also got North playing South. That's on the 19th of September. So, of course, as we get updates in as far as the results of these games, we'll make sure to pass that along for you. But, as we get further along in the season, I kind of feel like and I'll be totally honest, I didn't do the prep I needed to do as far as high school football scores for week 1. So we'll try to do a better job at that as we get going. I just kind of feel like now we can finally get excited about football. Like last weekend, I wasn't. Now I am. So I feel like we can actually follow that for not only the pros and the college, but also high school.
All of it just snuck up on us so fast. I mean, there's just so much going on. All the sports trying to go at once. Obviously, we've got 100 other things to worry about. It feels like football just went from 0 to 100, just like that. And here we are, and it's finally time to settle in and start getting back to our normal football scheduling.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's our really terribly unprepared Wichita whip around for this episode of Keeper of the Games. Hey, I'm the one that, always says each week that we're wildly underqualified. So clearly we are underqualified when we're talking about prep football. We'll get better at that as the season goes on for sure. That's our Wichita whip around here on Keeper of the Games.
Tommy, that just means we're living up to our expectations. If we're setting the expectations at wildly underqualified, boom, expectations met.
There you go. Yeah. Hey, you're a glass half full kind of guy, I suppose.
That's right.
We're going to wrap up the show. We are out of time, but before we wrap up the show, our Finally Funny, very briefly, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about it because I don't really think it's going to go anywhere, and I just kind of find it funny, is that the ACC and Coach K is spearheading this for college basketball for March Madness to be held with every single Division I team being able to play in the NCAA tournament. Is that a good idea for this coming season?
No, it's not a good idea, but I think it's hilarious imagining filling out a bracket with 352 teams or whatever it is. I heard or I read that a theory behind this is that they're trying to incentivize the smaller schools to not cancel their college basketball season by saying, hey, just play and you're in. But I don't know. It's a hilarious thought to me. If it wasn't for Coach K and Jim Boeheim, I would say this is for sure. No way this is happening. But I still just don't think this is going to work. Yeah.
It's kind of funny because we could have a serious discussion about this, but in my mind, it's so ridiculous that it absolutely is the Finally Funny. And
that's right.
I tweeted this earlier today, so you'll have to go to my Twitter and check it out. I don't know if you might be too young to remember this because, I am obviously quite a bit older than you are.
I'm a lot younger. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. A ton younger than I am. But this was about a decade ago. And there was a video put out by The Onion back when The Onion was like the big, parody news, network. And it was a video from The Onion Sports Network about how the NCAA tournament was going to be expanding to 4,096 teams. And they did this whole video breakdown of, it looked like Sports Center and analysts talking about, all the different schools, like, John's truck driving school now got into the tournament. And, so it's basically life imitating art. But I don't think this has any kind of legs whatsoever to actually happen.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been such a weird year, Tommy, that boy, if it was ever to happen, now would be the time, but I don't know. It just seems hilarious to me.
Absolutely. That's our Finally Funny. And hopefully, in my opinion, it doesn't come to fruition. It's ridiculous enough that we can laugh about it. Here on Keeper of the Games, we ran a little bit over our normal time here on this show. Thanks for hanging with us as we broke down what to expect with the Kansas City Chiefs as they get into action on Thursday night at Arrowhead. I know I asked you from a scale of 1 to a billion how excited you were. I'm probably 1,000,000,001 excited for this game. I'm really looking forward to it. What are you doing for the game? Are you staying at home? You going out? What are you going to do?
Yeah, I think I am going to stay home, at least this one. And mostly it's just because, again, it snuck up on us. But I actually talked to my wife about what we're thinking about doing is maybe hosting tailgates at our house, set up my 10x10 canopy in the backyard. I got a couple TVs that can move outside real easily and still get, access to everything, and just kind of tailgating in our backyard. Since we can't be at Arrowhead, I know we can, but it's pretty limited in Castor just through the roof. But nothing special tomorrow night, but that is in the works for the Mills household.
Well, I'll be looking forward to my invitation coming in the mail for those tailgates, right, for sure. I'll drive up to Kansas City. No big deal. That should be a lot of fun. We're just going to stay at home as well. I'm a big fan of buffalo wings for football games. Love them. Ooh, yeah. And since I'm not going to go out and I don't really want to order in, I've got a recipe to make crispy wings in the air fryer. So I'm going to try that tomorrow night with a variety of sauces. That's the goal for tomorrow's Chiefs game. And then, like we mentioned before, we'll have a recap of week 1. Hopefully we're going to be talking about a Chiefs victory for sure on next week's episode. So should be a lot of fun. Don't forget to subscribe before we leave. Want to remind you that way you get a notification anytime we have a brand new episode. You can find us on platforms like iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many others. Of course, you can watch full episodes on YouTube and Facebook by searching for Keeper of the Games, and you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at COGPod, at KOGPod. That Twitter account and our personal Twitter accounts are going to be really, really, really busy for the game. So make sure to follow us there for not just this game, but the entire season long. Remind folks of your Twitter handle.
At WMills94.
And you can follow me anytime at Tweets from Tommy. So until next time, for Weston Mills, I'm Tommy Castor. You've been listening to Keeper of the Games.
Take care, guys.
You've been listening to Keeper of the Games with Tommy Castor and Weston Mills. Don't forget to subscribe, download, and listen on all major podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. Find the podcast and videos on Facebook and YouTube at Keeper of the Games, and follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at COGPod. That's KOG Pod.